Hello everyone. So I got back a little bit ago from voting in the primary elections today, and I spent a couple days and most of this morning doing research in preparation for voting, which everyone really should do. I know the issues as they're listed. If you go to the Board of Elections websites for whatever state or district you're in, you try to take a look at the issues. They're really very complicated, but you do need to try to do your research to see where you stand on issues. Now, one of the more complex ones that was on the ballot in my region today, and probably many others from the looks of it, is an attempt to stop gerrymandering. Now, what this is described as the manipulation of the boundaries of an electoral constituency. They say an electoral constituency. Well, the redrawing of electoral district boundaries to favor one political party over another. Now, there were pictures of people outside Washington holding signs, I'm assuming aimed at the Republicans, because everyone's pissed off at Trump being elected, even though there's no real reason why. Well, no, I know why. It's because it's not what they wanted, even though they just brutally harassed Trump last election. Will you accept the results of the election if Hillary wins? Will you accept it? Will you accept it? Just harassment. And then, of course, when Trump wins, they go completely lose their mind. So that was a hypocrisy right there. And, you know, the Republicans won an election rigged against them last time, and they didn't need to without relying on gerrymandering. So I don't think we need to turn gerrymandering to our favor. Because here's the thing. This is a little bit similar, actually this is very similar to the conservative stance on free speech. If free speech is taken away, or let me put it this way. The reason conservatives want to keep free speech, want to keep any kind of free speech no matter what, even if it's directed against them, even if it's hateful towards them, which a lot is. Well, all of the speeches, this hatred of Republicans, it's not actual arguments, it's just mass hysteria and anger. If an argument comes along that's bad, we want to rebut it. We want to be able to win the argument. And once you take away any kind of free speech, the door is open to take away all free speech. It's precedent setting, you understand? It's like this. If you make a rule that can be used against anyone, well, at some point it's going to be used against everyone. It's going to be used against even the people who introduce it to use it for their own ends. It's going to be used against them at some point. So even if there's a time when Republicans are able to use gerrymandering to their favor, we know it's going to be used against us in the future. And the opposite too, right? I mean, that sign works for Democrats as well. If Democrats were pushing for the end of gerrymandering, the redrawing of boundaries where more people tend to vote Democrat, and it does have large ties to demographics. People of one demographic tend to have distinctive ways they vote separate from people of another demographic. Now, what should go on, I mean, we could say any number of ways the world should work. The way we think voting should work is that everyone does the research, everyone chooses their position on an issue or the candidate they want based on who they really think will do the best job. What it actually turns out to be is certain groups really do have their favorites and the ways they vote on emotion. That's what actually happens, which is distinct from what we believe should happen. So it's the should have versus actually does. And when you live in a real world, you do have to take the what actually does happen into account. Or at least, and smart people can do that. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we have very many smart people voting. So we will see how the attempts to put an end to gerrymandering play out. If it is ended, could there be negative consequences? We will have to see. It's a little bit early to tell exactly what might happen, but the selecting of boundaries based on how people vote, well, then it's automatically not trusting people to make informed decisions. Now, whether they are or not, it's almost saying, we know how you're going to vote, so we're going to draw the districts the way we want. Which, there should be immediate problems with that already. So, no, I think it does need to end. Another thing was tax levies for schools and libraries. Those were the two where I live. I assume in many regions there are others. In addition to that, the library near me is just going full on political correctness, so I don't like that. I don't like that the library is completely buying into that. I don't like that the schools are completely buying into that, so I said no. And you have to be careful of the signs that say, vote for issue, whatever number it is, more money for the schools, more money for education, more money for health or for drug treatment centers, not a tax increase. Well, see, one of the major problems is that what I would really like people to understand first is that you want to increase some kind of service, like education, like healthcare, is that the money to do so has to come from somewhere. So you should be asking the question, where is the money coming from? Now the sign says not a tax increase, so okay, where is that additional money coming from? Well, with the public schools, a lot of them are paid for by property taxes. So it might not be extra money in the name of going to the school, but additional property taxes. And, housing is expensive enough as it is. So that is and the other thing that could be is if the tax is already there, and the issue is to continue the funding. Well, that's a continual taxes. It might not be an increase, but it's continuing where, maybe you could take the money you're being already taxed and use it for something better, saving for the future of your family or something. Now, you used to be possibly putting your kids through school, but now school is betraying and completely wasting and draining the formative years of young people, so I'm no longer putting any more money into that. So I need to take a short break, write a few things down. I'm working on some other projects. I will come back in a little bit and continue this video. Yeah, so I'm back. So when I went in to vote in the primaries this morning, a couple interesting things happened on my way as I was entering the parking lot. There were a couple of people out with a petition right by the side of the driveway. I walked there, but I had to walk through a parking lot. But so the first couple were asking people to sign this petition. And I walked up to them, curious, and asked, so what's this petition about? They said, this one guy holding the petition said to get people accused of possession of drugs out of prison. And I said, well, I'm going to need more detail than that. So I was turning over the clipboard and reading right from the description listed, which said to me didn't really have a great understanding of the petition he was trying to get signatures for, which was not a good sign. But I did. So I tried to go through it. Normally I would have said I would have taken it as, well, if you don't understand what you're even asking me to get on board with, then I'm not even going to bother. I did stick around a couple more seconds because I was trying to read it myself, and I had to almost try to read it better than he did, and summarized it as, well, what it looked like was trying to get signatures for a petition for people in jail only imprisoned for the possession of drugs, not the dealing of drugs, but only the possession. Now, I don't know how fine or broad the line is, but that's another issue. We'll talk about that in a second. So people in jail only for the possession of drugs, trying to petition to get them out of prison and get them back into jobs. Now, there's a couple of questions to be asked. First of all, we do know the war on drugs, as it's called, is a complete failure. I mean, police can't even keep drugs out of prisons. So, and this is what really angered me about the movie American Made, is this photographer was flying over, I think it was Central America, maybe in South America. Well, that region. I went to see it with my dad and brother quite a while ago, last summer, I think. And it was captured by one of the drug cartels. The drug cartels said, we will let you go if you smuggle our drugs into the United States. When he got back to the United States and the CIA found out about this, well, they kept using him to take pictures, ultimately distribute weapons, and of course the drug cartel kept him, the pilot's name was Barry Seal, kept him doing their drug smuggling business, and it just became a clusterfuck. And this is based on a real story. It's a real, it made me really pissed off. You know, this is why a lot of people in the world don't have a completely unjustified view of America just exploiting and arming and drugging other places. It's you know, we all have the words that power corrupts, right? And people will they will sell drugs, they will sell weapons as long as it gives them profit. And the majority of the public, the majority of a country's citizens are, of course, kept completely in the dark about this until decades later when it's too late for them to do anything about it. It's infuriating. It's really infuriating because it destroys people all over the world. Yeah, so I'm back. So when I went in to vote in the primaries this morning, a couple interesting things happened on my way as I was entering the parking lot. There were a couple of people out with a petition right by the side of the driveway. I walked there, but I had to walk through a parking lot. But so the first couple were asking people to sign this petition. And I walked up to them, curious, and asked, so what's this petition about? They said, this one guy holding the petition said to get people accused of possession of drugs out of prison. And I said, well, I'm going to need more detail than that. So I was turning over the clipboard and reading right from the description listed, which said to me didn't really have a great understanding of the petition he was trying to get signatures for, which was not a good sign, but I did. So I tried to go through it. Normally I would have said, I would have taken it as, well, if you don't understand what you're even asking me to get on board with, then I'm not even going to bother. I did stick around a couple more seconds because I was trying to read it myself, and I had to almost try to read it better than he did, and summarized it as, well, what it looked like was trying to get signatures for a petition for people in jail only imprisoned for the possession of drugs, not the dealing of drugs, but only the possession. Now, I don't know how fine or broad the line is, but that's another issue. We'll talk about that in a second. So people in jail only for the possession of drugs, trying to petition to get them out of prison and get them back into jobs. Now, there's a couple of questions to be asked. First of all, we do know the war on drugs, as it's called, is a complete failure. I mean, police can't even keep drugs out of prisons. So, and this is what really angered me about the movie American Made, is this photographer was flying over, I think it was Central America, maybe in South America. Well, that region. I went to see it with my dad and brother quite a while ago, last summer, I think. And was captured by one of the drug cartels. The drug cartels said, "We will let you go if you smuggle our drugs into the United States." When he got back to the United States and the CIA found out about this, well, they kept using him to take pictures, ultimately distribute weapons. And of course, the drug cartel kept him. The pilot's name was Barry Seal. Kept him doing their drug smuggling business, and it just became a clusterfuck. And this is based on a real story. It's a real. It made me really pissed off. This is why a lot of people in the world don't have a completely unjustified view of America just exploiting and arming and drugging other places. It's we all have the words that power corrupts, right? And people will they will sell drugs, they will sell weapons as long as it gives them profit. And the majority of the public, the majority of a country's citizens are, of course, kept completely in the dark about this until decades later when it's too late for them to do anything about it. It's infuriating. It's really infuriating because it destroys people all over the world. Destroys American. The majority of the population of Europe doesn't want any more immigrants. A couple of countries are beginning to turn away from globalism. Russia pulled out, which is the real reason, well, one of the real reasons that the left has been trying to create this Trump-Russia collusion story, really because they're pissed with Russia. I mean, if Hillary had been elected, we would have been straight into all-out war with Russia. And I remember the night Trump won, there were people from all over the world sending messages thanking American voters that for saving them from someone who was so gung-ho about starting a World War III or IV. Some people call it the Cold War World War III, but it's neither here nor there for this discussion right now. And the Democrats have been trying to ruin that. They want war with Russia. As far as I can tell, I mean, they kept the story on for a year. So, there were also people on the way to vote trying to pass out information about Democratic candidates. I told them outright, I don't vote Democrat anymore. They blew it. Now, oh, yes. So, and a lot of these migrants, particularly from Central America, are trying to free countries that are just ruled by gangs. I mean, we want to help communities. We want to help poor communities. We want to help black communities. Let's crack down on the gangs. That would really help. Cracking down on the gangs. Cracking down on, well, people can't seem to find ways to intelligently crack down on terrorist groups, except for Russia, who did a pretty good job fighting ISIS in the Middle East. I'd say let them fight ISIS. And let China deal with North Korea. It's back to the question of, can you really try to help anyone else in the world until you get your own country together? And I think the answer to that is no. You need to get your own country together first before you try to help anyone else. So, yeah, I think the solution to fighting against the horrible effects of drugs is, well, giving people something to do besides joining gangs. Restore the stable family, which, I mean, you never hear the left talk about. Here's a huge hypocrisy. Why did it suddenly turn so bright and golden? The sun's in the wrong place. Never mind. So, the argument again, well, I'm being generous when I say argument, against the sealing of the borders from people trying to come into the country is, there are immigrants already in the country who want to bring our families in. Do you want families to be split up? What? If you care about keeping families together, crack down on the family courts. That's the huge family destroyer. Don't talk to me about the moral questioning of putting up a border wall that will keep some family members apart, until you start tearing down the family courts that are destroying Western families. If you care about keeping families together, show that your own culture can keep them together first. And these are things I've talked about in several videos. Okay, so I may not have talked about all the issues. Did I mention the... Well, the second petition someone's tried to get me to sign was of trying to open more drug treatment centers in the neighborhoods. But this person couldn't answer the question of why do people turn to doing drugs? Well, a lot of it has to do with the collapse of the stable family, stable job structure, free world, and the complete failure of the public schools to even teach the very basics of logic and of critical thinking. I mean, when was the last time you had a class or a teacher that even went through the logic of arguments as I'm doing in this video? Of anything similar to that. I mean, you can disagree with me all you want, but let's at least go through the logic. So also on the ballot, there were things like, there were candidates for governor, attorney general, state auditor, secretary of state, state treasurer, senator, representative, and a bunch of judges. Now, one piece of advice for if you're going out to vote and you weren't able to do research on everything, never just guess. I know this happens. People won't do the research on every issue. They think they have to mark down a choice for everything. No, you don't. If you have things you're uncertain about, or choices between a couple candidates that you don't know anything about either of them about, or any of them about. Sometimes there's more than two. Sometimes there's a lot more than two. You can leave those blank. In fact, do leave those blank. That's better than an answer you later find out you disagree with. And you can vote for what you know. This is why there are you can go for an issues-only ballot. Though how easy those are depends on how complicated they're worded sometimes, and sometimes those will lead you astray. So be careful reading those, because sometimes when you're reading of an issue that you want passed or introduced, saying, but the issue is actually have it opposed or stopped. I know it's really complicated, and sometimes even if you read it carefully, it can still be complicated, because the people who write these are not very good writers, or they're doing it, or they're creating the confusion intentionally. Sometimes saying yes on something you want will actually be a no, and sometimes a no will actually be a yes. Not all the time, but be as careful as you can reading them. Now, for a lot of these, there were only one choices. I did have to do some research to look at what was the better of two or more a couple of times. I mean, this is an off year. This is not a presidential election, so it's a little more. Well, it's not more complicated, but sometimes it can be. Sometimes it's just not as much attention devoted to it, even though the candidates are still running campaigns. You just don't hear as much. But and often the information, not great information, is available, or even if it is, you don't know exactly what the choices will be till later on. But set aside a couple of days to just do some research. I know it's late now, but this is actually the problem I had. I tried to do research early on. Not enough information was available, so I had to piece together some stuff. I remember when I was looking at the state, I think it was the state treasurer, at least that one, maybe a couple others. There were a couple of different choices, and one of them was when I read a bit about them, one's policies were a little too reminiscent of Justin Trudeau's, trying to play that equality of representative in positions group. I think it was need to get more. The first thing on our website was we need more women in political administration or politics. Instant turn off. If that's your reasoning, I'm not voting for you. Now, the other, fortunately, started with actually real discussions and real ideas. So I voted for him. We can't play this political correctness, political equality. We can't play this yeah, well, there's a whole question of what do you ever mean when you say equality. But we can't play that equal representation just to have equal representation of each group. We're really in a... Well, we always are, but particularly now when the world is falling into chaos. We need people elected with actual ideas, actual arguments. This is why I voted for Donald Trump. He had real arguments, real answers. Hillary Clinton did not. That was the reasoning. So yeah, voting is not just a right. It's a responsibility. And because your votes create real changes, and it is your responsibility to bring about positive changes, not changes that just make you feel good. And this is why we need free speech. We need to not shrink away from discussions. We need to not shrink away from conversations. We need to not only claim to have the right to, but we need to practice the adult art of negotiation.